3 days after her meeting with the Elder Council, Elena received their decision. The Vox Collective, a hive mind species known for their logical thinking, had proposed a series of tests. Humanity would face manufactured crises to demonstrate whether their contingency planning was truly defensive rather than aggressive. Elena sat in her temporary quarters on Terminus, reading the details on her tablet. The tests would be difficult and potentially dangerous, but they offered a chance to prove humanity's true nature to the galaxy. Ambassador Reyes called a voice through her communication system. "You have visitors." Elena was surprised. She wasn't expecting anyone. "Who is it?" "Representatives from 7 different species request a meeting," replied the automated system. Curious, Elena agreed to see them. When they entered her quarters, she recognized them immediately. Junior diplomats from various civilizations, including the Drakathi and Verendi. "Ambassador," said the young Drakathi, his scales a lighter green than his senior counterpart, "we have come because we wish to understand humans better before these tests begin." Elena gestured for them to sit. "What would you like to know?" "Why do your people think this way?" asked the Verendi representative, her purple fur rippling with curiosity. "Why prepare for disasters that may never happen?" Elena thought carefully about how to explain humanity in terms these aliens could understand. "Let me tell you about Earth," she began. "Our planet has a violent history. Not just wars between humans, but natural disasters too. Massive earthquakes that destroy cities in minutes, storms that can flatten entire regions, volcanoes that have wiped out civilizations." She showed them images on her tablet, the ruins of ancient Pompeii, the aftermath of the Great Indonesian Tsunami, the devastation of the North American Dust Bowl. "Humans lived through these events for thousands of years," she continued. "The survivors were always those who prepared, who had plans for when things went wrong." The Mukhar representative, a floating blue gas inside a transparent sphere, pulsed with confusion. "But many species face natural disasters. We do not all develop extinction plans for other intelligent life." "It goes deeper than that," Elena explained. "For most of our history, humans weren't the strongest creatures on our planet. We couldn't run as fast as predators. We didn't have natural weapons like claws or venom. We survived by planning ahead, by preparing for threats before they arrived." She showed them more images: early human settlements with walls to keep out predators, food storage systems for winter months, irrigation channels to survive droughts. "When we finally met other intelligent species," Elena continued, "we simply did what we had always done. We made plans for all possibilities, good and bad." The Eltani representative clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "But that doesn't explain plans for extinction-level actions against peaceful trading partners." Elena sighed. "After humans developed advanced technology, we nearly destroyed ourselves several times. The climate wars of the 2100s killed 3 billion people. The artificial intelligence crisis of 2187 almost ended human civilization completely." She showed them images that made several of the aliens step back in horror: flooded coastal cities, massive refugee camps, the ruins of once great metropolises. "After each disaster, we swore never again. We created more comprehensive plans covering more possibilities. When we reached the stars and met you all, our instinct was to continue this approach." The junior diplomats exchanged glances. The Drakathi representative leaned forward. "Show us one of these contingency plans," he requested. "Not one for extinction, but something else." Elena hesitated. The contingency protocol archives were still classified, despite her accidental revelation. But perhaps transparency was the only way forward. She tapped on her tablet and pulled up a file labeled Drakathi Containment Protocol 7. "This plan was developed 3 years ago," she explained. "It's designed to be implemented if the Drakathi Empire attempted to blockade human colonies." She displayed the plan on a holographic projector. The aliens studied it with interest. "This doesn't involve attacks on our homeworld," noted the Drakathi representative with surprise. "It's focused on maintaining supply lines to human colonies and negotiating an end to the blockade." Most of our plans are like this, Elena said. They focus on protecting human lives while minimizing harm to others. The extinction-level plans are last resorts, only to be used if there's no other choice. She switched to another file. This is the Mukhar Solar Transition Protocol. Your sun will begin to destabilize in approximately 872 years. This plan outlines how humans could help evacuate your people and preserve your culture. The Mukhar representative's gas cloud swirled rapidly. A sign of strong emotion. You've planned to help us? But we've only been in contact with humans for 23 years. That's what humans do, Elena said simply. We plan for problems before they happen. She showed them more plans, medical responses for potential pandemics that might affect alien species, evacuation procedures for space stations, terraforming projects to create new habitable worlds. For every plan that involves conflict, she explained, we have 3 more focused on cooperation and mutual survival. As the junior diplomats studied these plans, Elena could see their perspectives changing. What they had initially seen as threatening was beginning to look different, perhaps even admirable. Your species is strange, Ambassador Reyes, said the Verendi representative finally. You prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. That's an excellent way to describe humanity, Elena agreed. When the diplomats left, Elena felt a small hope growing. If these younger representatives could understand humanity's perspective, perhaps there was a chance for the broader galactic community to do the same. Her tablet chimed with a message from Earth. Admiral Zhang's face appeared on the screen. The Elder Council has set the first test for tomorrow, he said without preamble. Are you ready? Elena thought about the conversation she'd just had. I believe so, but I have one condition to propose before we begin. What condition? Zhang asked, looking concerned. We need to invite observers to Earth, Elena replied. Aliens who can see our culture firsthand, who can understand why we think the way we do. Zhang frowned. That's a security risk. It's a risk we need to take, Elena insisted. They fear us because they don't understand us. The only way to change, that is to let them see who we really are. After a long pause, Zhang nodded. I'll take it to the Security Council, but the tests will proceed regardless of their decision. As the communication ended, Elena looked out at the stars visible through her viewport. Somewhere out there, human colonies were preparing for potential conflict, and alien civilizations were watching closely to see what humanity would do next. The tests would not be easy, but they offered a chance to show the galaxy who humans truly were, not the monster some feared, but a species determined to survive while helping others do the same. The first test began 1 week later. The Elder Council had created a simulated resource crisis in the Altera system, where both humans and 3 other species maintained mining operations. Suddenly, all parties were informed that the system's rare minerals were contaminated, and only 30% of the expected resources would be available. Elena watched from the observation deck of the human station as the news spread. According to the test parameters, the 4 species had to decide how to divide the limited resources. The elders wanted to see if humans would use their contingency plans to secure everything for themselves. All station personnel, this is Administrator Chen, announced the human leader of the Altaris operation. We are implementing Resource Sharing Protocol Delta. I repeat, Resource Sharing Protocol Delta is now active. Elena smiled. Resource Sharing Protocol Delta was one of the contingency plans from the archives. It outlined a fair distribution system during shortages, ensuring all species received essential supplies. Within hours, human ships were helping organize a rationing system. The human administrator met with representatives from the other species to create a fair allocation plan. The humans aren't fighting for the resources, observed Elder Zor, who had come to watch the test alongside Elena. Your people are helping organize sharing arrangements. That's what the contingency plan called for, Elena explained. Fighting would waste resources and damage relationships we'll need in the future. Elder Zor's many eyes blinked slowly. Interesting. We expected your species to be more aggressive. Planning isn't about aggression, Elena replied. It's about finding the best solution for long-term survival. The second test took place 3 days later. This time, the elders staged a border conflict with the militaristic Krell Dominion. The Krell, large insectoid beings known for their territorial aggression, were informed that humans had violated their space near the Proxima Centauri colony. Elena watched nervously as Krell warships approached the human settlement. The elders had assured her that the Krell understood this was a test, but the warships looked very real and very dangerous. To her surprise, the human colony didn't launch fighters or power-up weapon systems. Instead, they activated a specialized diplomatic team. This is the Krell Cultural Engagement Unit, explained Admiral Zhang, who had joined Elena for this test. They've spent years studying Krell psychology, language, and cultural values. The diplomatic team made contact with the Krell ships. Instead of discussing the border violation directly, they began with ritualized greeting challenges that were important in Krell culture. They spoke in perfect Krell dialect, including the subtle mandible clicks that most non-Krell couldn't pronounce correctly. Your people prepared specialists just for talking to the Krell? Asked Elder Vorla, who was observing alongside Elena. We have similar teams for every species we've encountered, Zhang confirmed. It's part of our first contact contingency protocol. They watched as the human diplomats skillfully navigated the conversation, acknowledging the territorial concerns while suggesting a mutual boundary verification process that would satisfy Krell honor requirements. Within hours, the crisis was resolved without a single shot fired. The Krell warships departed, and the human colony returned to normal operations. Most impressive, admitted Elder Vorla. Your contingency plans clearly include more than just military responses. The third and most critical test came a week later. Without warning, an unknown alien force attacked a small human research outpost on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons in humanity's home system. The attack was actually staged by Elder Council forces, but the humans on the outpost weren't informed ahead of time. Elena watched the real-time feeds with her heart racing. This was the most dangerous test yet. How would humans respond to a direct attack? The outpost's alarms blared as strange ships appeared and began firing on the facility. Damage was carefully controlled to avoid casualties, but the humans on Europa had no way of knowing that. Emergency protocols activated, reported the outpost commander. Initiating evacuation plan Omega. Instead of returning fire with their defense systems, the humans focused on getting their people to safety. Evacuation. Ships launched while shield generators protected the escape routes. Medical teams prepared to receive injured personnel. What surprised the watching elders most was what happened next. Once the human staff was safely evacuated, several of the medical ships actually turned around and headed back toward the attacking vessels. What are they doing? Asked Elder Mithra, her crystalline form glittering with concern. Medical Response Protocol 17, Elena explained, checking her tablet. In case of attack by unknown hostiles, attempt to render medical aid to any injured attackers once our own people are safe. The human medical ships approached the enemy vessels cautiously, broadcasting offers of assistance in multiple languages and formats. They had no way of knowing this was a test, yet they were following a contingency plan that prioritized saving lives, even the lives of those who had just attacked them. They're offering to help their attackers? Elder Mithra seemed shocked. Why would they do that? New species often attack out of fear or misunderstanding, Elena explained. Helping injured attackers might open diplomatic channels and prevent further conflict. At the very least, it shows we value all life, not just human life. The test was immediately halted. The Elder Council had seen enough. Meanwhile, on Earth, another aspect of the test was unfolding. As Elena had requested, alien observers from 12 different species had been allowed to visit human cities, military bases, schools, and government facilities. A Verendi observer named Tala found herself in a human elementary school in the city of New Denver. She watched with interest as young human children, no more than 7 years old, participated in something called A disaster drill. When the alarm sounds, the human teacher explained to the children, everyone needs to get under their desks, cover their heads, and stay quiet until the all-clear signal. The children practiced quickly and efficiently. Afterward, the teacher explained different drills for different emergencies, fires, storms, and other dangers. You train your young to prepare for disasters? Tala asked the teacher later. Of course, the teacher replied. It keeps them safe. All human children learn basic emergency procedures. In another part of Earth, a Drakathi observer named Sakvir was touring a human military facility. He watched soldiers practicing combat scenarios against simulated alien technologies far more advanced than human weapons. You train to fight, species with superior technology? He asked the human commander. We train for all possibilities, the commander explained. Our history teaches us that preparation saves lives. This seems pessimistic, Sakavir observed. We prefer to call it realistic, the commander replied. We hope for peace while preparing for challenges. That's the human way. Across Earth, the alien observers were documenting humanity's contradictory nature, their preparation for conflict alongside their dedication to cooperation. They recorded war games and defense drills happening at the same time as humanitarian missions and cross-species medical research. Your species is strange, an Eltani observer told his human guide at the end of the day. You plan for violence while working tirelessly to avoid it. As the test concluded and the observers compiled their reports, Elena waited anxiously. The future relationship between humanity and the rest of the galaxy now depended on how these other species interpreted what they had seen. 2 weeks after the tests concluded, Elena was called back to the Elder Council chamber. The 7 ancient beings sat in their massive stone thrones, studying her with unreadable expressions. Before them lay data tablets containing reports from the tests and observations from Earth. Ambassador Reyes, Elder Zor began, his multiple eyes blinking in sequence. We have reviewed the results of our tests and the reports from our observers. Your species has surprised us. Elena remained silent, waiting for their judgment. In each test, humans demonstrated responses we did not anticipate, continued Elder Mithra, her crystalline body catching the light. You chose cooperation over conflict, diplomacy over force, and assistance over retaliation. That's what our contingency plans called for, Elena explained. The best way to ensure human survival is usually to work with others rather than against them. Elder Vorla leaned forward. Yet you maintain plans for the potential extinction of other species. This contradiction troubles us. Elena was about to respond when an urgent communication interrupted the meeting. A young aide rushed in and whispered to Elder Zor, whose eyes widened with alarm. The council meeting must be adjourned, he announced. We have received disturbing reports from the outer sectors. The Savari hive clusters have begun an aggressive expansion into populated systems. Elena recognized the name. The Savari were an insectoid species not part of the Galactic Concordat. They were known to be highly territorial and relentlessly collectivist, viewing all other life forms as either resources to be harvested or obstacles to be removed. 3 minor worlds have already been overrun, Elder Zor continued. The Concordat must respond immediately. As the elders hurried out to consult with their military advisors, Elena received her own urgent message from Earth. Admiral Zhang's face appeared on her tablet. Have you heard about the Zavari? He asked without greeting. Just now, Elena replied. The elders are in a panic. Zhang nodded grimly. This is a real crisis, not a test. The Zavari have been dormant for nearly a century. No one expected them to suddenly expand like this. What do they want? Elena asked. Resources, territory, and biomass, Zhang replied. They strip planets of anything useful and convert other life forms into food or building material. They don't negotiate or compromise. Elena felt a chill. What's Earth's position on this? We've activated the Zavari containment protocols, Zhang said. All human colonies near their territory have been placed on high alert. But Elena, I think you should offer our assistance to the Elder Council. Our assistance? Elena was surprised. We're still viewed with suspicion by most species. This is an opportunity to show them what humanity's planning is really about, Zhang explained. We've been monitoring the Zavari for years, even though we've only had 3 verified encounters with them. Elena understood immediately. We have contingency plans for the Zavari. 17 of them, Zhang confirmed. From limited contact response to full containment strategies, we've even developed specialized weapon systems designed to target their hive communication networks. Elena nodded slowly. I'll speak to the council immediately. 3 hours later, Elena stood before a hastily assembled emergency meeting of the full Galactic Concordat. Representatives from 37 species watched as she addressed them. Respected delegates, she began, Earth understands the threat posed by the Zavari. While we have had limited direct contact with them, we have been monitoring their activities and developing response strategies since our first encounter 23 years ago. She activated a holographic display showing detailed information about Zavari biology, hive structure, and expansion patterns. Humanity offers its full cooperation in addressing this crisis, she continued. We have analyzed Zavari biology and identified vulnerabilities in their hive communication networks. We have developed specialized countermeasures that would disrupt their coordination without requiring extinction-level actions. The room erupted in surprised murmurs. Elder Zor raised his arms for silence. You have plans for dealing with the Zavari? He asked, his voice registering shock. Despite minimal contact with them? That is what humans do, Elena replied simply. We prepare for problems before they happen. She showed them more data, projected expansion routes, vulnerable systems, in the Zavari path, and detailed defensive strategies for protecting populated worlds. Most surprising, she continued, is what our observers discovered 3 days ago. She displayed images showing early warning beacons placed at strategic locations near vulnerable worlds not under human control. The beacons were clearly of human design. These automated warning systems were deployed by Earth 5 years ago, Elena explained. They were designed to provide early detection of Zavari activity near populated systems belonging to other species. We also established evacuation protocols for worlds we believed might be in their expansion path. The Drakathi ambassador, who had once threatened Elena, stared at the images in disbelief. You protected planets that weren't your own? Planets belonging to species that don't even trust you? Elena nodded. The contingency plans aren't just about human survival. They're about preserving life wherever possible. The Galactic Concordat delegates looked at each other in confusion and growing respect. What they had initially seen as threatening paranoia now appeared in a different light. Elder Vorla addressed the assembly. The Concordat has no effective strategy for dealing with the Zavari threat. Their biology and social structure make traditional diplomatic approaches impossible. Military responses have proven ineffective against their distributed hive architecture. She turned to Elena. We wish to review these contingency plans in detail, Ambassador Reyes. For the next several hours, Elena worked with the Concordat's military and scientific leaders. She shared the detailed plans that humanity had developed, from defensive strategies to protect vulnerable worlds, to specialized disruption technologies that could break apart the Zavari hive communication without destroying them completely. What impressed the alien delegates most was the thoroughness of the human analysis. Despite minimal contact, humans had studied Zavari remains from previous conflicts, analyzed their attack patterns, and even developed theoretical models of their psychology and decision-making processes. Your species prepared all this based on just 3 encounters? Asked the Makar representative, his gas cloud pulsing with amazement. We believe in being thorough, Elena replied. The universe is full of potential threats. Being prepared gives us the best chance of survival, not just for humans, but for all sentient life. As the emergency session continued late into the night, a plan began to take shape. A coordinated response to the Zavari threat led by humans but executed by a coalition of species. The Drakathi ambassador approached Elena during a brief recess. His scales had returned to their normal emerald color, no longer pale with fear or aggression. "I once threatened your colonies, Ambassador Reyes," he said quietly. "Yet your people established warning systems to protect Drakathi worlds from the Zavari. Why?" Elena smiled. "Because that's what contingency plans are for, not just our survival, everyone's." 1 year after Elena's accidental disclosure in the Galactic Concordat chamber, she stood on the observation deck of Harmony Station, a massive space facility orbiting Luna, Earth's moon. Behind her stood representatives from 42 spacefaring civilizations, all gathered for a historic occasion. The coordinated response to the Zavari threat had transformed the galactic perception of humanity forever. What had begun as a diplomatic disaster had turned into humanity's greatest triumph. "Ambassador Reyes," called a familiar voice. Elena turned to see the Drakathi ambassador approaching. His scales glittered with ceremonial oils applied for the occasion. "The ceremony is about to begin." Elena nodded and followed him into the main chamber. The enormous room was filled with beings from across the galaxy, some floating, some crawling, some walking on multiple legs. At the center stood a simple podium, bearing the new emblem of the Interspecies Strategic Planning Commission. The Verendi High Chancellor, her purple fur adorned with the symbols of her office, stepped up to address the assembly. 1 year ago, she began, her translator converting her words into multiple languages, "we gathered in fear because we discovered that humans had plans for our potential extinction. Today we gather in gratitude because those same plans helped save countless lives across 17 systems." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of sounds, the equivalent of applause in dozens of different biological forms. "The Zavari incursion has been contained," the Chancellor continued. "Their hive networks have been disrupted, and their expansion halted without requiring the extinction of their species. This outcome would not have been possible without human contingency planning." Elena remembered the past year with mixed emotions. The initial implementation of the Zavari containment protocols had been challenging. Many species were reluctant to follow human leadership, and mistakes had been made. But the coordinated response had eventually succeeded. The specialized disruptors designed by human scientists had broken the Zavari hive communication, turning their unified advance into disorganized groups that could be contained and redirected away from populated systems. "Today, we formalize what began in crisis," announced the Chancellor. "The Galactic Concordat hereby establishes the Interspecies Strategic Planning Commission, with humanity appointed as its first chair." Elena stood and approached the podium. As the newly appointed Director of Interspecies Cooperation, she would oversee the sharing of contingency planning methodologies across species. What had once been seen as humanity's dangerous paranoia was now recognized as their greatest contribution to galactic stability. "On behalf of Earth, I thank you for this honor," she said, looking out at the diverse assembly. 1 year ago, I accidentally revealed that humanity had plans for the worst possible outcomes in our relationships with each of your species. Today, I'm proud to say we're developing plans together for our mutual survival and prosperity. The contingency protocol archives had been partially opened to allied species, though with appropriate security measures. Other civilizations had begun adopting the human approach of preparing for worst-case scenarios while actively working to prevent them. After the ceremony, Elena walked with Admiral Zhang through the station's arboretum, a peaceful space filled with plants from dozens of worlds. "Did you ever imagine that your diplomatic blunder would lead to this?" Zhang asked with a smile. Elena laughed. "Never. I was certain I'd destroyed humanity's place in the galaxy." "Instead, you found our place," Zhang replied. "For centuries we wondered what humans could offer to more advanced civilizations. Now we know." Their conversation was interrupted by an approaching Eltani, its insectoid body moving gracefully between the plants. "Director Reyes," the Eltani said, "the Mukhar delegation would like to discuss the Nova evacuation protocols. Their sun's degradation has accelerated, and they believe they have less than 700 years remaining." "Tell them I'll join them shortly," Elena replied. The Eltani bowed and departed. "Always a new crisis to plan for," Zhang observed. "That's why they need us," Elena said. While other species evolved in more stable environments, Earth forced humans to become masters of adaptation and preparation. Our paranoia turned out to be our gift to the stars. In another section of the station, a group of junior diplomats, human and alien alike, were participating in a training exercise. They worked together to develop contingency responses for a simulated supernova in a densely populated sector. Consider all variables, instructed the human trainer. Not just the immediate explosion, but radiation effects, refugee movements, resource shortages, and psychological impacts on affected species. The alien diplomats, once baffled by the human obsession with disaster planning, now embraced this approach with enthusiasm. They had seen how effective it could be during the Zavari crisis. That evening, a celebration was held in the station's grand hall. Representatives from dozens of worlds mingled, sharing food, drink, and stories. Elena watched from a quiet corner, still amazed by how much had changed. The Verendi High Chancellor approached her, offering a cup of bubbling blue liquid. "A drink from my homeworld," she explained, "reserved for moments of profound transformation." Elena accepted it with a nod of thanks. "You know," the Chancellor said quietly, "when you first revealed those contingency plans, I had nightmares about humans for weeks. I imagined your species as calculating monsters, coldly planning our destruction." "And now?" Elena asked. "Now I understand," the Chancellor replied. "Your plans weren't about wanting our destruction. They were about respecting us enough to be prepared for anything." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the diverse gathering. Species that had been enemies for centuries now worked together on planning committees, sharing knowledge and resources. "In their strange duality lies wisdom we had forgotten," the Chancellor said thoughtfully. "To hope for the best while preparing for the worst. To plan for disaster while working to prevent it. Perhaps humans were exactly what the galaxy needed." As the celebration continued around her, Elena reflected on how a diplomatic gaffe had transformed humanity's place in the galaxy. Their perceived weakness, their fragility compared to other species, had driven them to develop their greatest strength, the ability to imagine and prepare for any future, no matter how terrible or wonderful. Humanity had finally found its role among the stars, not as conquerors or victims, but as the species that always had a plan. The end.